let me tell you the story of an extremely controversial game. Bimbo, or My Bimbo for those of you who don't speak French, was a dress-up browser game launched in 2007 intended as a parody of quote-unquote celebrity and fashion culture. Despite widespread criticism of its offensive concept and terrible messaging, the game went on to get a popular English remake which was met with similar outrage. Everyone's freaking out over the French to English website game Miss Bimbo, where players create bimbo characters and progress through the game by acting like Paris Hilton. Alarm as dolls get breast implants in Miss Bimbo game. Shallowness unashamedly reigns supreme in terms of the lengths the in-game bimbos must go in order to achieve success. Breast implants and diet pills are their power-ups, and level grinding is replaced by finding a rich boyfriend to sponge off. Miss Bimbo is the epitome of a controversial site, scorned not only by parents and the media but by players, as countless dramas transpired on the bizarre website. Seriously, even beyond the controversial nature of the game, this is one of, if not the most bonkers internet dramas I've ever come across. Seriously, buckle in. So today let's take a look at the ill-fated Miss Bimbo and the very controversial modern reboot Bimboland. Just a few quick disclaimers before we get into it. This video is not intended at all to be serious or scary or dark in any way, but we are going to be discussing games that bring up topics of fat phobia, eating disorders, unhealthy beauty standards, and general sexual jokes and references. Nothing graphic or scary is going to be shown, but we will be discussing those aspects, so just wanted to let you guys know. Secondly, this video wouldn't be possible without two really great write-ups on the various sites, written by Reddit users Popcornomicon and Throwaway Misconduct respectively. Information could be extremely scarce and hard to find on these games, so both of these were instrumental in piecing together the story. They'll be referenced throughout the video and linked in the description. With that out of the way, pack your bags and get ready for a trip to Bimboland. Before we get into things, I just want to give a huge thank you to Likewise for sponsoring this video. These days there are so many streaming services and so much content that it's easy to get streaming fatigue and just end up scrolling for half an hour without finding anything to watch. That's where Likewise TV comes in. Likewise TV is a personalized streaming hub that makes finding something great to watch easy. It consolidates all the old and new releases from tons of different streaming services like Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, HBO, and more, and suggests shows and movies that I'll be interested in. If I see something I like, not only can I super easily check which streaming service to find it on, I can add it to my Likewise watch list, so I have one big watch list for all my streaming platforms. And when I'm ready to watch something, Likewise TV conveniently launches my next movie or TV show on my streaming service. It's super easy. Likewise also has a spotlight that lets you know which TV shows and movies are new and leaving each platform, which is super handy since I swear whenever I want to watch something, it turns out Netflix removed it the day before. Also, I see so many people saying they wish Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever had comments so you can see what other people think before you watch, and Likewise TV has that. You can check tons of comments and reviews from the community on various shows and movies so you know what like-minded viewers think. If you want to check out Likewise TV, head to the link in the description and check out my lists. You can save these lists yourself if you want some recommendations to try out. I highly recommend everything in here. I mean, obviously, I'm the one who made them. Likewise is honestly super awesome. It's helped me save a ton of time finding stuff to watch, and by heading to the link in the description you'll be helping the channel out as well. Thank you so much to Likewise for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back into the story of Bimboland. Okay, so this story gets confusing fast unless you differentiate between the four, yes literally four, Miss Bimbo games, so let's do that first. Bimbo, the original French game, launched around 2007 and was an online simulation / dress-up game aimed at preteen and teen girls. It quickly skyrocketed to popularity and now has over 20 million users, by far one of the most popular online simulation games for girls in France. The company behind the game, Bimbo, then attempted to make an English version of the game called Miss Bimbo. It wasn't anywhere near as successful as the original game, and so Bimbo gave Miss Bimbo over to two guys named Nico and Chris, who started a company called Blowzar Inc. They're controversial and they will come up a lot in this video. The two companies then split, again more on that later, and Bimbo went on to create their own English version called Like a Fashionista. Nico and Chris retained the rights to Miss Bimbo and developed it as its own thing. There was tons of drama, and eventually the site shut down around 2013 to 2014. In 2016, Chris launched a modern reboot of the game, this time under the name Bimboland, and this is the site that's up and running today. We'll be covering the 2 English games, the 2008 Miss Bimbo and the 2016 Bimboland. So Miss Bimbo, or MB, was an online simulation / dress-up doll game. In the game you started with a basic doll, which you then had to level up by feeding her, buying her clothes, getting her plastic surgery, and getting her a boyfriend / sugar daddy to fund her lifestyle. Players had to earn money and buy tons of clothes to level up and get boyfriends with thousands of clothing and hair options. The dolls could lose and gain weight, and players were encouraged to keep her waif thin by going to the gym and using diet pills. In fact, dolls had a stats page with their ideal weight on it, and if you went over this, the game would give you a warning. Plastic surgery, including rhinoplasty, lip suction, and breast enhancement, was necessary to level up, and if not fed and looked after, the bimbos would literally die like a Tamagotchi. A few choice quotes from the website read, quote, "Breaking up with your first boyfriend has made you depressed and you've gained weight. Lose the weight to less than 60 kilos. Your mirror no longer says you're the most beautiful, you're very upset. Go to the clinic for a facelift. You're participating in a modeling session for plus size women. For that you'll need to gain weight to weigh over 70 kilos. Go to the gym and regain your ideal weight, 58 kilos. George, your new boyfriend, loves plastic surgery. Go to the clinic and have a breast operation to enhance your silhouette." Despite the very adult themes, tons of young children were drawn to the game, lured in by the cool artwork, the edgy, mature tone of the game, and the challenge to become the hottest, coolest, most famous bimbo ever. It's alleged that the site's initial sign-up age was only 13+, and this combined with the sparkly pink cartoon aesthetic made the very adult game look harmless to kids. Both sites were heavily criticized by parents and the media for their harmful content, and while I couldn't find that much for the French game, I found a lot of coverage of the English one. The game was originally picked up and heavily covered by British media outlets, presumably because the owners Nico and Chris were based in the UK, and news quickly spread across the country through articles and news segments which covered the harmful messaging of the game.
Nicola, this is your bimbo.
Yeah, this is my bimbo.
It's called Miss Bimbo, and in it, players get their own female character to look after. You're encouraged to choose sexy lingerie. Keep her waif thin, with diet pills if necessary. Make her more attractive, even with cosmetic surgery, and find a rich boyfriend to look after her. But others describe it as frightening and dangerous.
The message is clear and simple. A girl's value is in her looks, and if you're not happy with it, then fix the way you look, and that's the only way you'll be happy.
It tells you that a balanced diet is a plate of vegetables, which is clearly nonsense, and it tells you that cereal bars make you fat. They are not messages that we should be giving to young children.
And then is the name.
How would you feel if someone called your little sister a bimbo?
I wouldn't like. No, I don't like. Of course, no one to want to be a bimbo, but it's not their life, it's a game, so why not be a bimbo on a game?
News publications around the globe were pumping out article after article on MB. The website was a super hot topic back in 2008, especially among parents who were worried about what their kids were exposed to online. Body image experts and child psychologists were weighing in about the dangers of the website and how damaging they were for children, so in the face of this media frenzy, the creators began responding. Quote, "The average age on Miss Bimbo is over 19 years old. MB is a good game for everyone and is definitely better than the real bimbos on TV like Paris Hilton or Page 3 girl Katie Price. MB is actually making fun of those bimbo celebrities that are on TV. Our players are not bimbos at all, and that's our best defense against people who try to denigrate our community. It is not a bad influence for young children. They learn to take care of their bimbos. The missions and goals are morally sound and teach children about the real world. If they eat too much chocolate in the game, it is bad for their bimbos' bodies and their happiness levels compared to if they eat fruit and vegetables, which reinforces positive healthy eating messages." So this is interesting. Firstly, the phrase, "it is not a bad influence for young children, they learn to take care of their bimbos," is hilarious. Secondly, their point about the game being satirical and for adults is fair. I mean, it's clearly meant to be this very outrageous and shocking parody of a doll site, and I think it achieves that pretty well. But then they bizarrely try to spin it both ways, saying that it's both this really adult satirical parody and a healthy teaching tool for children, which, no. It was also found that while yes, a large chunk of the player base was 19 or over, 60% of its users were aged 18 or younger and around 8% of users were only 13. And look, I get it, this game is like a very obvious parody, it's offensive and shocking on purpose, it's meant to be outrageous and overdramatic and overblown. I don't think kids playing it are gonna run out and get rhinoplasties or anything, but giving specific target weights as low as 50 kgs, telling players that 70 kgs is overweight and encouraging them to carefully monitor their character's weight using diet pills if necessary is very worrying. The age thing has been an issue in the MB community for a long time. The creators openly address and acknowledge their young demographic, and on multiple occasions have tried to push for a lower age limit on the site. Users continue to push back against this because they don't want minors in an otherwise adult space. We'll come back to this later, put a pin in it. So yeah, the game was controversial, obviously. Remember, this was back in 2008 before the term bimbo/himbo became like an endearing internet term, I guess, and before more alternative fashion was popular. The public were up in arms. This game was going to turn all the children into tiny Paris Hiltons, which was a fate worse than death apparently. Seriously, the amount of times news articles would casually just drag Paris Hilton in their coverage of the game when she had nothing to do with it is weird.
Despite some similarities in appearance, Jacquard says Miss Bimbo is not modelled on any one celebrity.
All of the scathing media coverage actually brought more eyes onto the game, leading to a huge spike in players, with around 2 million players signing up to create their own virtual bimbo.
This website has triggered a loud public debate in Britain, and the people who run Miss Bimbo admit the numbers using the site here have soared because of that debate.
This was actually pretty meh compared to the French version, which had over 20 million players, but it was still pretty impressive for a small web game run by just 2 guys. And speaking of those 2 guys, they were super controversial not only with the parents and media, but with the players themselves. Let's rewind back to the very start of this video when we were talking about all that convoluted company stuff. Originally, the French and English versions of MB were planned to be developed alongside each other. They used all of the same art and had all of the same content, but English players found that their version was receiving much slower updates. English MB was lagging behind, and after 2 months of asking for updates with no response, Nico and Chris abruptly announced that Bmove and Blazar had split. The specific reason for the split has never been disclosed, though many presume it was some sort of messy disagreement. Blazar somehow ended up getting the Miss Bimbo trademark, which is why Bmove's second attempt at an English release was called Like a Fashionista, since they couldn't use the actual original title anymore. Shortly after the split, the site got a complete overhaul, with the layout, website design, and dolls all getting polished new redesigns. And the reason I'm bringing all of this up is because this was the moment that Miss Bimbo became its own thing. It was no longer an extension of the original French site, but its own separate entity. More importantly, Nico and Chris were no longer partnered with Bmove and could basically do whatever the hell they wanted with the site, and boy did they. Miss Bimbo was plagued with issues from the very start, and most of this has been attributed to the unprofessionalism and poor business decisions of the staff team. The first signs of trouble started pretty much as soon as the new site artist was hired on. After finishing the site redesign, he was responsible for creating new clothing and hair collections on a regular basis, but players began to complain as updates slowed down and became more sporadic. He apologized and blamed the late updates on not having internet access, but players dug around and found his hobby account, where it was found that he was regularly posting personal artwork at times that he said that he had no internet. I've also seen claims that he was copying the designs and art of smaller artists for his own collections, but any proof that was compiled of this is long gone with the site itself, so take that with a grain of salt. What tangible remnants we do have on this situation can be found on the artist's old website, where he issued a response to the backlash against him. Comments made by players suggest that the site was silencing criticism and banning users who criticized him, and this is by far the last time you'll hear of that happening on the site. Another drama occurred when users noticed that the panel of judges on the next top model contest, which usually consisted of the artist and 2 fictional NPCs, had a 4th member named Catherine. No one could figure out who he actually was, and players became suspicious when they saw that he was progressing through the game extremely fast, earning double the amount of money and XP as other players could, and even buying items that were beyond his level. Sleuths dug deeper and found out that Catherine was actually the artist's boyfriend in real life, and then accusations began flying about the staff team giving their friends admin privileges and boosted stats. You know, playing favorites. The outrage persisted for another year until Next Top Model shut down, and shortly after all of this went down, the artist is presumed to have been fired. Okay, so here's the part where we start talking about Chris. The 2 creators had always been controversial, but while Nico seemed to defend the site against criticism, Chris thrived off of the drama. He's the villain of the story, the dictator of Bimboland, if you will. He was infamous in the MB community for making both extremely unpopular business and game decisions, as well as being confrontational and combative towards any player who dared criticize him. And since he's allegedly made legal threats towards people and allegedly banned people for speaking out against him, I would like to remind everyone watching this video that everything in this video is alleged. I'm not trying to defame or cancel anyone. That's genuinely not my intention with anything that I make. I'm just trying to cover a story. I'm basing this on things that I've read online. It's all alleged. Anyway, one such example of this unprofessionalism came with the bodyguard update. One day the game was updated so that each player was given a bodyguard who would charge a daily fee of in-game currency Bimbo dollars. You couldn't fire or get rid of the bodyguard, and the higher your character's level, the more money he would drain from your account daily. To be clear, the bodyguard didn't have any actual purpose. He didn't do anything in-game other than take money from your account, and the admins explained this as balancing. They felt that higher level players were earning too much BD to the point where they couldn't spend it all. The players on the other hand felt that it was just a shady scheme to force them into buying premium currency and membership, since in reality the bodyguards would take so much money that they were taking more than players could earn daily. Even if players spent all of their time grinding, the stupid bodyguard PNG would just drain all of their money instantly. Obviously there was a huge uproar as players petitioned Chris to remove the feature, and this did not go down well. Dear Chris, just sell the site. Really, it would be good for everyone, even you. Listen to me, you offensive little wench. How about you piss off to another site? I will do whatever I wish and your offensive nonsense will not sway me. You are a lazy little toad and any more lip from you and I'll help you on your way. This still isn't balanced. Shut up and give us your money. I hope the bodyguard is part of the overall plan to make MB a better, more interesting game very soon. There are other games out there, and if you do not care about keeping us happy, then we will not care about keeping you in business. Sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful to you. I know that without you we are nothing, but it's very hard when you're all so stupid. To all bimbos who complain about professionalism, this is Miss Bimbo, not Miss Boring. Please take your head from up of your own ass and buy some Bimbo dollars. To all bimbos who want to lecture us on how to run a business, thanks, but I have a first in customer service and Nico has a first in web management, so please take your head up of your own ass and buy some Bimbo dollars. To all bimbo who threaten to sue us, leave to X site, delete their account, that's a mistake. You're gonna miss out on some fun over the next 6 months. But it's a free world and we're sorry you made the wrong decision. But before you go, can you please take your head from up of your own ass and buy some Bimbo dollars? To all the bimbos who whinge about us making changes / not following the rules, that's our right, annoying as it may be to you. We are the rules. It's a privately owned website and your presence here is a privilege we kindly afford to you. So be grateful and stop whinging. We will do whatever it takes to make this place work, so please trust us and give us time. We are trying our hardest to entertain you, and if you don't want to trust us and give us time, you can always make the mistake to leave. But before you go, can you please take your head up of your own ass and buy some Bimbo dollars? A lot of criticism that players were offering was polite, constructive, well worded, but Chris had a complete meltdown about it. Chris had always been a fairly polarizing figure, but after this, players became outwardly antagonistic towards him. Anti-Chris groups and threads started up, players put memes and references to him in their bios, and fan-made forums and sites began popping up to give players a place to vent about Miss Bimbo without their threads being deleted or their accounts being banned. Shortly after this, Chris issued an apology for his behaviour. A few quotes read, "Whilst I agree that swearing at you aggressively is unacceptable, I simply don't accept that I am not allowed to stand up to you when you are wrong or rude, which happens quite often. I concede at times I overstep the mark, and for that I am very, very sorry, but I do feel that you are too sensitive and precious as a rule. I'm sure you can appreciate that it's not a healthy relationship if you are simply allowed to swear and curse at me when we are working our hardest every day to make this site the best possible with our limited resources. I am sure that you can appreciate that I am not simply going to accept that I must shut up and roll over to inaccuracies or offensive comments either." He then goes on to explain that people deleting their accounts because they disagree with him is them being too precious, and is the exact same as him deleting posts that he doesn't agree with, which is certainly a take. And on the one hand, I absolutely agree. I think that a lot of people on these small niche community sites see admins as like this emotionless, faceless monolith, when in reality they're just a small group of regular people who have thoughts and feelings and are probably pretty deeply affected by the amount of hate that they get on a regular basis. And I'm sure that as the owner of the site, Chris did get a lot of really horrible, personal, nasty comments, and that's not okay at all. But on the other hand, a lot of the examples I've seen are him replying to perfectly reasonable, polite, and constructive criticism. Players aren't being mean or hateful or precious when they criticize an objectively bad feature. There's a difference between reprimanding people who send you horrible messages and hate, and getting irate at every player who criticizes the game. After this drama, Chris announced that he would be stepping down from the public eye and appointing a new administrator called Cindy. Cindy joined the site under the account name Miss Bimbo and was quickly made the head administrator of the website. However, it became apparent very quickly that Cindy was just Chris under a different account. Admins or developers using in-game characters or profiles to convey news and updates to players is not uncommon at all, but what was weird was that Chris interacted with Cindy like a lot. I I have to say that Sweet as Nuts is a real dish, isn't he? I do love chatting with him. He's so kind and thoughtful and handsome. His voice is so masculine and sexy and British. Let me know when you need a massage or presidency and it will be my pleasure to serve you. My hands are ready and are waiting to serve the royal bimbo butt cheeks. Oh my god. This happened a lot and left players wondering why Chris was spending all of his time role-playing with basically himself. Also, yes, it got more explicit than this, and no, I am not going to show it in this video. One really weird footnote in the site's history is Chris's other business ventures. During the early days of the site, he actually left to create his own company and products, including 2 knockoff sites called My Minx and My American. These games are sort of perfect examples of Chris thriving off of negative press and outrage. In My Minx, players were encouraged to buy orphans from countries like Ethiopia, Malawi, and Vietnam to quote, make their family more fashionable. Many of the children were heavily based off of the real-life children of celebrities, and several were horribly stereotyped, with their favorite foods being stuff like rats and guinea pigs. In terms of My American, in pretty much every snapshot I can find from the Wayback Machine, the site is completely balked, but I guess you can kind of get the idea of what it was about from the descriptions. My American is a virtual Yankee Doodle world. Live the American dream from poverty to the White House. Are you ready to make it in the land of the free? Create your very own American. Nurture and treasure your little Yankee Doodle. Become the biggest, fattest, most disgustingly obese American the world has ever known. Make it in LA as a superstar A-list actor. Obviously these were both sort of soulless attempts to recapture the outrage of the original Miss Bimbo. They were sort of all edge and no substance, and as far as I can tell, neither of them lasted very long. Anyway, Chris eventually made his way back to the site to resume his administrative duties, and the drama started up pretty much immediately. A new site-wide event was launched claiming that the website had been hacked by an organization of goths called the Black Bimbos, and that Cindy had started up her own group to fight them called the Pink Bimbos. The site pressured players to pledge their allegiance to the Pink team and stomp out the fictional hackers, and they did this by spamming the hell out of their mailboxes. Players would get DMs from random bot-looking accounts saying like, join the Pink team, I pledge allegiance to the Pink Bimbos, we gotta get these hacker guys. While players originally thought these DMs were coming from spam bots, several users woke up to find their own mailboxes flooded with messages asking them to stop spamming people. This led to the theory that Chris was basically hijacking a bunch of random user accounts to send the messages through, which at best is very weird and invasive, and at worst potentially against terms of service. As all of these big dramas were occurring, players were noticing that the site was deteriorating. After the old artist was fired, it didn't seem like a new one was ever hired, since clothing updates pretty much stopped completely. Bugs and glitches were common, and if you couldn't tell, the relationship between the players and the staff was pretty tense. All of these issues had been weighing on the site for a long time, and they all finally came to a head around 2013 to 2014. In what can only be assumed as a last-ditch effort to revitalize the site, Chris declared that he would be making MB into an 18+ space and removing all minors from the site, which users had been begging him to do for a really long time. Despite the fact that PayPal refused to do business with the site if they went ahead with it, Chris soldiered on, creating explicit NSFW sections in the forum, including one called Bimbo Perverts, where users were encouraged to post real-life NSFW videos and photos. Players were leaving the site in droves at this point, so again, as a last-ditch effort to draw them back, Chris decided to have Cindy step down from being head admin and hold an election for the new administrator. It says a lot about the game that this terrible idea to have players vote for the next admin literally in charge of the site actually made the game a lot better. By all accounts, the player chosen, Riri, was very responsible and made a lot of effort to actually improve and clean up the site, which was all undone by Chris and Nico when one fateful day they replaced the entire site with a picture of Goatsy. Yeah, they literally Goatsied their site for no discernible reason, and when Riri posted off-site that her and her team had been locked out of their admin accounts, Chris went onto the forums to blame her and ban everyone on her team. Riri was able to post photo proof that she was innocent, and when the player base got angry at Chris for lying and Goatsying them, he resorted to once again calling them stupid and banning anyone who disagreed. Apparently, after Chris threatened legal action, Riri actually ended up getting lawyers involved for defamation, and her account was promptly reinstated. But by this point the writing was on the wall, the site was falling apart, the players were in an uproar, and the player numbers had been dropping by the day. The numbers dwindled until there was barely anyone left, and the site quite literally came apart at the seams, just a basic default looking webpage with a few scattered images and broken links. And that marked the end of Miss Bimbo, a fittingly scandalous end to a very controversial site. And while tons of players were upset about the shutdown obviously, and they'd missed the friends that they'd made along the way, a lot of them had been expecting this for quite a long time. Little did they know that the story was far from over. We good? We doing okay? The story is honestly wild. If you need to take a breather, I completely understand. So in 2016, Chris decided to reboot Miss Bimbo as an entirely new site, the Internet Republic of Bimboland. The site's emphasis was no longer on fashion but politics, branding itself as the first Internet Republic and allowing players to run for Prime Bimbo in democratic elections. Upon creating a character, you're asked to choose a state, from atheista to anti-theocra to freethinkerland, which all have varying stances on topics like gun control and the death penalty. No, I'm not joking. Most were excited that the site was back and they'd be able to use all the old MB dolls and dress them up again. Others were unenthusiastic and confused about the political aspect. Most of them were just there for the dress up, so this weird democratic Internet Republic political gameplay was kind of odd to them. Regardless, the site amassed a small but loyal fanbase of old and new players, many of the newer ones coming from sites like Tumblr and TikTok, where the game experienced small booms of popularity. Like Miss Bimbo before it, Bimboland has been criticized for its shoddy site and game design. Chris isn't an artist. All of the original site art was done a long time ago, and so rather than hiring new artists, he simply filled the site with random clip art. Many of the logos and banners, several of which have visible watermarks and pixelation, can pretty much all be found on Google Images. All of the clothing, hair and makeup was ported over from the original 2008 website, so any new pieces of clothing, hair and makeup are completely user-made. That explains why there's such a disparity in the art style of the game. Many items are perfectly normal, high-quality assets, but others are bizarre, ill-fitting, pixelated, and poorly drawn. You can have a character wearing a highly detailed, realistic top and a skirt that looks like it was drawn in MS Paint, or a pair of pants that's literally just a PNG of jeans. Players seem to be able to draw pretty much anything and slap it onto whatever category they want, which results in finding really weird random faces and bodies in completely unrelated categories. Some clothing is even glitched and incomplete. According to the Reddit write-up, players who create clothing for the game are rarely compensated, often having to contact admins to beg for money or at least a copy of their own garment. But what we're really here to talk about is the site's quote-unquote system of government, which is actually really interesting. Players can buy £15 a month memberships, which among the usual online membership perks give players the role of senator. Every 4 months the website holds an election where senators are able to run for the role of state minister, which basically makes them the head of their chosen state, of which there are 6. During that same election, the Prime Bimbo is elected. Players vote on who they want to be PB from the 6 state ministers and the current PB. The player who wins is elected and wins a cut of the website's earnings, known as the treasury. Yeah, you can actually earn money in this game, and not just a few bucks, several $100s. Currently, as I write this, there's nearly $400 in the treasury, with the last term's earnings being over $600. So it seems like there's a lot of incentive to become PB, but a lot of players feel that the role, which lasts 4 months, is too much responsibility and it's just a way for the staff to offload PR and admin work onto a random player. The role of PB has been described as a mediator between the game team and the player base, which is a really big responsibility that not a lot of casual players are ready to take. From throwaway Miscnum's Reddit write-up, quote, "Out of the 6 state ministers, typically only 2 or 3 of them will run. One Prime Bimbo got burnt out on the job and quit mid-session. The game team promised that the next PB would get her earnings, but the player base demanded that she be paid for her time. She said that she didn't want the money and that it could just be donated to charity. I'm not sure what happened to her money. And the money, not super reliable. I've heard from recent PBs that they've gotten their money, but older PB apparently have been shafted. I've also read posts from both regular players and actual senators / PBs that seem to indicate that the PB was given a lot of responsibility but virtually no power. This whole system of basically putting a random unpaid internet user in an extremely stressful site admin position where they get blamed for all of the bugs and glitches but can't do anything about them is bad. There's no other way to put it. I've never seen any other site do this. It's bizarre. Regardless of the vaguely shady politics, the Prime Bimbo election and the treasury is still like the site's main gimmick, so it's a pretty big deal for all the players involved. The elections have always caused scuffles and infighting, and most elections have been bungled by the site admins in one way or another. But there was one scandal. The biggest scandal to hit the Pink House in BL's history. A scandal that many users feared would bring the site down for a second time. It was known as... In February of 2020, a new Prime Bimbo was elected, but players were confused to discover that members of the PB state, Atheista, now had gold username bars. They also received several hefty stat bonuses and gifts of premium currency and items. Chris posted an update explaining that there was a quote-unquote constitutional crisis in Bimboland. Our 2-tier system with President, me, and the PB as head of government has worked well and served its purpose until now. But like all countries, we must evolve and modernize. The previous system had its flaws, and recently it did not generate the level of support and backing of the wider Bimbo public. Election turnout was low and the number of Bimbos putting themselves forward for the most prestigious role in the world has declined election on election. I have decreed that for 1 year only we will try a new system of governance where the Prime Bimbo will duly be elected from the state that has the most votes and support. In layman's terms, not enough players were signing up for the role of PB, so in order to incentivize them to take part in the election, the state with the most votes would automatically have their state minister become PB. Obviously this was a terrible idea. Since big bonuses for the winning state were introduced, everyone would just vote for their own state regardless of who the best candidate was so they could get those sweet rewards. And since everyone was just voting for their own state, it meant that whichever state had the most players would basically be guaranteed to win every time. The democracy was broken, which in some ways made it more realistic, but the players weren't happy. The original announcement thread went on for 10 plus pages with everyone slamming Chris and the admin team for this terrible decision. They're mad only 2 or 3 people are running for PB each election, so they changed the system so only 2 people even have a remote chance of winning. What's the point of agnostic estate minister even trying to run? She won't win. If you want more people to run for the prestigious position of Prime Bimbo, maybe open the elections to more than 6 people? Maybe make an incentive for voting in general? This reasoning is stupid and I won't be participating in elections at all anymore, thanks. Well, I'm pretty sure the next election turnout will be even lower because of this. What is even the point of an election if the biggest state will win anyway? With all due respect, I guess, the reason that less and less players want to run for PB is because it's been demonstrated that players' voices don't actually matter and that the election process is merely a marketing gimmick. No PBs, state ministers, or senators were contacted to provide insight as to how gameplay would be affected or how players would respond to such a huge change in the election process. If you would have talked to literally any of us, we would have told you that it was a bad idea. And now your solution is boo-hoo, I'm president and what I say goes, instead of you and the rest of Team Bimbo humbling yourselves and responding to players' complaints appropriately. As you can probably tell, the response was extremely scathing and overwhelmingly negative, like everyone was roasting the absolute hell out of the admins for this. Tons of people made custom outfits and skins for their characters to mock Chris and Miss Bimbo, as well as point out the many flaws in the new system. A month later, Chris returned with an apology and promised that players from winning states would no longer be given bonuses, but when the next election rolled around, they were still getting bonuses. Shortly after this, an extremely bizarre and rambly update post was made letting players know that they were thinking of only allowing senators, aka paying players, to vote in state elections. It was yet another idea that made the game's whole democracy thing kind of pointless since it meant that only paying players would have any effect on the site's government. Again, I'm having to hold myself back from making multiple just like IRL jokes. This update also proposed the nonsensical idea of creating several other government positions, including Foreign Affairs Minister, to be responsible for protecting bimbos all over the world, e.g. in Facebook land, Reddit land, Tumblr land, Insta land, etc., and promoting and representing Bimboland on the international stage and bringing bimbos home, whatever that means. And also these roles. There are multiple responses asking Chris to please stop the cringy sexual role-playing in every thread, since most users have expressed that it makes them extremely uncomfortable, and I can see why. Players were also just confused about what any of this even meant, or why they wanted to open up like 5 different pointless and confusing staff positions when they struggled to even fill the PB role each term. As far as I'm aware, this did all end and Bimboland's democratic system returned to normal, but as far as players were concerned, they kind of felt like this was the beginning of the end. The old website had a similar string of sudden, jarring, and ill-informed game changes that resulted in site-wide outrage, and I guess players are just starting to see similar patterns emerge on the current site. There are countless dramas that have transpired on the site since the constitutional crisis, like more than I can even count, so let's just rattle off a few. In late 2020, a thread was made titled BL Site Owner Doesn't Care About Their Users or This Site. In it, the OP and numerous other players bring up their issues with the site, from mass bot voting in elections to the poorly maintained website to the fact that at this point it seemed like Chris was treating the site like a social experiment to just mess around with. Obviously, the topic of age limits came up as it always did, and players expressed their discomfort at the huge amount of minors on the site. They felt that the staff were purposefully keeping the age limit low to cater to the huge influx of Tumblr and TikTok teens joining the website and buying senatorships, where they would be exposed not only to inappropriate game content but a community full of grown adults who use the site as an adult space. This thread started very civilly, everyone contributed their thoughts, built on each other's ideas, and politely agreed with each other, until Chris showed up and everything blew up. The thread grew to be over 50 pages long as Chris began replying to all the criticisms and getting into arguments with players. These back and forths would span entire pages, and he would often revert to petty insults, even telling one forum guardian that by criticizing the site they were stepping out of line and undermining the PB. He also accused players of being ageist towards 16 to 18-year-old players for saying they shouldn't be on the site. Okay. The thread was eventually locked, but oh my god, if you have a spare hour and want to read some of the most bonkers player-staff interactions and arguments you've ever seen, I highly recommend. Miss Bimbo, began really heavily shilling this book she wrote about her life called Cindy Larson and the Fashionable Republic of Bimboland, the story of the world's most fashionable nation. It's basically just Chris's forum roleplays but turned up 100 notches and spread across nearly 200 pages. You can barely tell it's written by a middle-aged man from the UK with topical references to new and hot celebrities like Victoria Beckham and Posh Spice. The book is available on Amazon, and in a 2021 post, Chris wrote that he would be sending out copies to current and ex-state ministers who provided their address. This was not received well. The concept of Bimbo.land being an online nation and democracy has always been a bit of a tongue-in-cheek joke. Chris would make these grand presidential speeches about how great their nation was, and it was a funny little bit. At least that's what I thought. A product? Is this just a product to you? BL is a product? Is America a product? Italy? France? I wouldn't call those products, would you? BL is a country, the world's first ever internet republic, a state. This is history we are speaking about. Why do you use the word product? It's a nation, not a site, a country. Don't you understand that? You are founding a bloody country. The world's first internet republic. Bimboland is not a bloody website. How many times do I have to say that? Stop calling it a website and have the courtesy to know what you're working towards. When I first looked into the site, I genuinely thought that all of the in-character role-playing and the proclaiming that Bimboland is the greatest nation and democracy in the world was all just a joke, but there are numerous occasions where staff get genuinely mad at players for not taking it seriously. It's bizarre. Recently, the site was changed from Bimboland to Zimboland. The reason cited was so that the website could be more commercially viable to prospective partners, advertisers, and others. They also wrote, quote, "Zimboland is one of the last remaining politically incorrect non-woke places on the internet. The change has nothing to do with being politically correct or woke at all. It's simply a way to engage people who are turned off by the word bimbo." I had spoken to some investors who said they loved the site and community and potential, but they hated the direct bimbo reference. Some people believe the term bimbo to be negative, that turned them off. This change was not at all popular with the players. Some felt that this was a performative decision to make the site more woke, others felt that the change was redundant. I mean, if the investors didn't like the B word, the X word wasn't much different and meant the exact same thing. Some felt that it stripped the site of its classic hyper-feminine aesthetic, which was what drew a lot of players to the game in the first place, and some just didn't care at all. There are so many other micro dramas and weird controversies and infights, like if I covered it all, this video would be like 5 hours long. Suffice to say, Zimboland is a pretty interesting little corner of the internet. It's honestly pretty wild, and I'd like to conclude this video by taking a look at the current state of the site and how the site is faring in the modern day. The coverage of Miss Zimbo/Zimboland in the modern day is actually like super interesting. One article from Mel magazine published in 2021 calls the site philosophically nuanced and reads, quote, "Having existed for over 13 years now, though, Bimboland proves this intellectual undercurrent has been a part of the superficiality of bimboism all along. Compared to the public's reaction to the site in 2008, which was basically shock, outrage, and condemnation, these days it's viewed as a sort of defiant feminist statement about society, which is pretty hilarious when you actually look at the history of the site. It started as a cynical and pretty openly misogynistic parody game meant to be shocking and offensive. It was run by an owner who called players wenches and toads and treated them like entitled idiots because they were the ones who signed up to play the game. In fact, Chris hasn't posted on his personal Zimboland account in nearly a year, and his last ever post basically says this exact thing: "You signed up for the site, so don't cry to me about being offended." It's just really interesting to see how the public's perception has shifted over time. It started as an offensive and shocking site that kids signed up for just to be edgy, and now has transformed into honestly a pretty wholesome and inclusive community. From what I've seen on the site, most senators and even state ministers openly shit-talk BL and its creators. In fact, most of the player base has this sort of resigned, yup, this is hell, but it's our hell energy, where they hate everything about the site but just stay there out of spite, and also to dress up dolls in pretty clothes. And it's kind of understandable, all of them have been through years of bugs and glitches, site drama, and arguments with the admins over the most benign things when all they want to do is just play dress up. I played the game a bit myself for this, and while the early level gameplay was pretty dire, a lot of it was just waiting real world hours to complete tasks, it was fun. Some nice people sent me DMs welcoming me to the site. I had fun looking at all the clothes and making different outfits, and all the weird user-made clothes made shopping feel like a weird MS Paint surprise bag. I've seen quite a few players suggest that everyone pull their money and buy the site off Chris so they can shape it how they want, but to be honest, I don't really see that happening. Honestly, at this point, who knows what'll happen to Bimboland? It could fizzle out like its predecessor when players get sick of dealing with all the site drama, or it could see a huge resurgence with players from Tumblr, TikTok, and Twitter joining for the aesthetic. It'll honestly be really interesting to see what happens to the Republic and its shaky democracy. I told you at the start of this video that I was going to tell you a story of a very controversial game, and it delivered in spades. From the shockwaves it sent around the world upon its controversial release, to the roller coaster of drama that was the original site, to the modern remake and its bizarre and scandalous politics. If you currently play the game, or used to play the game, or even used to play the very oldest version of the game, I'd really love to hear your thoughts below. As I said in the beginning of the video, information is fairly scarce on all of the sites, so I'd love to get some player perspectives, like if you're part of any of the drama, what you think of the site, or just any general experiences that you have. I'm sure that there's plenty that I missed out or wasn't able to include in this video, so please do share your experiences, I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching, I really appreciate it. I really hope that you guys enjoyed that video topic. It's, like I said, it's just bonkers, it's wild, it's strange. The whole site is just like, it's also convoluted. Like, I hope that you were able to follow along with the story because there was just so much going on. I love niche website forum drama, so this was definitely an interesting story to cover. Thank you so much to Likewise for sponsoring this video, I really appreciate it. If you have any suggestions for video topics that you want me to cover in the future, definitely let me know down below, I always love getting suggestions. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye! Thank you so much to my Garfield overlords over on Patreon: Sheriff Whiskey, Trebizonde, Lady Cerebellum, Xavier Arajo, SHSL Simpson, Grip Gunderson, Sophie Skidder, Simon, Katrina Likes 5e Stuff, Dozo Blint, Red Meth, The Fabulous Librarian, Matt LRJ, Ren Pendragon, Michelle Olsen, Astrian Vortex, Joe Bradshaw, Jordan Nielsen, John Leach, Jorge K. Cruz, Helm Hamburger Hand, Chicory, Jane, Kimono My Gyro, Fitzy, Pom, Dana Homegardner, Arcantilus, Jesse Chisholm, Charlie B, Brianna Robinson, Agarafin, and Doug. Thank you guys so much for supporting me, means the world to me. If you want to join these guys over on Patreon, the link will be in the description, and yeah, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!